Om Shtapakaya Chatarmasya Sarvatarma Swarubine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha. Om Namah Shri Bhagavate Ramakrishnaya Namo Namaha. Om Namah Shri Bhagavate Ramakrishnaya Namo Namaha. Om Namah Shri Bhagavate Ramakrishnaya Namo Namaha. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanao Punaktu Sahaviram Karavavahai Tevasvi Navaditamastu Mavidvi Shovahai. Om Shantihi Shanti Shantihi. There shines Brahman. May that Brahman protect us. May that Brahman sustain us. May that Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. Wonderful that we're all here on Sat Day. That is checking in with one another in both directions and having that sadhu satsanga that we so much appreciate in Vedanta, which, whether we consider this the end of the week or the beginning of the week, is perfectly poised right in the middle, so that we have this darshan with one another, or this holy communion. The soul is divine, and there's just one of them amongst us. It seems to be separated into many partitions or many parts or parcels, body-mind mechanisms, psychophysical complexes. But that one abiding, homogeneous, and undivided Atman, we call it in Vedanta, is what we focus on in Vedanta. Helps us transcend all the pairs of opposites, go beyond race and color and gender and politics and military and all the things that people are on the computer about nowadays as you look around. And focus back on that single individual consciousness that wants to join with the indivisible consciousness. That is, the Jivatman is Shiva. The Jiva is Shiva, or Jivatman is the Paramatman. My teacher used to say that in his talks all the time. So this apparently individualized self is really one with the Supreme Self. And we all know, as we enter into the play of consciousness, that then we're in the realm of Maya. That is, we're associating with it. We should not identify with it. So that's one of the great runs of higher truth that the mind concentrates on, is to be free of identification with things and back off to this consciousness position in which one can associate with things, sort of like putting a colored flower in front of a crystal, and then it takes on the crystal takes on the color of that. So there's the crystal by itself would be Advaita Vedanta without any coloration. And then when you do enter into association, then you take it on not as a stain or as a just as a false superimposition, and not something that will detract from your realization, your higher knowledge, that that Brahman and Atman are one, and that even the Jiva, the apparently individualized soul, is one with that supreme consciousness. So concentrating on that in meditation, we can use these associations or metaphors in nature, like the wave from the ocean or the cloud in the sky, or the spark from the flame. These are all used by the Upanishads to draw the mind back towards that initial essence, which is our very self. That is our higher self, the indivisible self. And then the individual self can exist as in association with everything external. So that's where you get those beautiful slokas like Purnamadaha, Purnamidam, Purnat Purnamadachate, Purnasya Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vashishyate. That this external is finite, but it's also infinite in display. And then inside of us is this infinite mind with its display of thoughts and concepts. And from the finite outside, it connects to the infinite. So from this infinite, the finite comes. And since they're both infinite, they both have infinite display, then only infinite remains when you put them together. Like pure water poured into pure water becomes one and the same. You say that when you do the puja or the worship, when you're sitting in front of the shrine. Yadakam shude shudanam shiktam tadrugeva bhavati. You pour water from one container into a larger container, when water becomes one and the same. So like that, the soul has to meditate upon this ocean of Brahman from the standpoint of being a separate drop or a separate wave, and then merge into those waters. There are many, many slokas about merging in the Upanishads, as if these great sages and seers wanted us to make the attempt to have samadhi, even from the standpoint of individualized consciousness. So all of that is fair game to meditate upon and immerse ourselves, merge ourselves into that ultimate reality, which is the main focus of the Upanishads. And you see it portrayed very nicely in the Bhagavad Gita as far as the external on the battlefield there, battlefield of the world. And then you see it philosophically dissected and taken apart and reasoned about very deeply and realized finally in the Brahma Sutras. So these three great scriptures are the Prasthanatrayam, the three great landmarks of scriptural history. You look at the three of them, you see the philosophical truth, and then you see the practical truth, and then you see the spiritual truth of the matters. And then you can say that you have checked in, like we're doing today with one another, with the Shruti, with that which has to be heard in your life. And then once you hear it once in your life, you get that taste for the divine, just like you would with the mantra for the Ishtam. You get the taste of doing mantra, and that would take over your thoughts. In the same way, in non-duality, you get this taste for the absolute reality through Shruti and Yukti and Anubhava. And by hearing the truth and then reflecting on it within and realizing it. Whether it's the three great scriptures or these three great stages of philosophy, or the three worlds or the three bodies, you have these divine triputis that you can place your mind on, which are not too difficult to comprehend for even the ordinary mind, and by which you can then transcend the dualities and realize a state of divine oneness, the homogeneity of everything, the natural innate oneness of the self with Brahman. And so then these words that you speak are only arrows pointing towards that. Even outer and inner become something that you need to merge together. Take what is external and what is internal and merge them into that highest Brahman. Then meditate upon that highest Brahman. Pass your time contentedly and be free. as Shankara says in the Vivekachudamani. So we gather for satsang here. I take a few minutes just to warm us up to the topic as usual. And then we ask you to come forward and join in, have some things to say about all of these great topics. Go ahead, Will. I think you have something on your mind. You can start us out.
Yeah, I've been really contemplating this word Brahman. As you know, last time I asked about the word and thinking about it. And I think in the Hindu tradition, they say that the space around the murtis stands for Brahman. The murtis stand for Brahma, for example, or gods. And in some ways, I found that appealing. But in the end of the day, I also found that, in my view, you can't make, there's no statement about Brahman you can make in any way that's going to pointless to even attempt to make any kind of statement on it, in my view. It's kind of clever. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
Definitely at the ultimate level, at the level of practice where people are trying to realize it, then that's where, as you were just saying, during the day, it sounded appealing to you. When you considered it, everything ended up back at the root again. So you can't enhance Brahman and you can't detract from it. So words like that or statements like that are mahavakyas or great statements. You can refer to those, but they're better to be meditated on in silence. There's no doubt. Yes. But then why are we here? At satsang speaking about it, because it sort of becomes a decision that yes, you cannot really explain it, but we still want to talk about it because it gives us a lot of peace, gives us communion, gives us brotherhood and sisterhood. And so there we are with both form and formlessness. As Sri Ramakrishna.
I find just what you said, I find the discussion is incredibly useful as long as it never ever descends into any form of argument or contradiction. This is so tiresome when people establish a dogmatic position. I mean, like whatever you say about it, of course it's going to be wrong, and of course you can contradict it, but it's a pointless exercise really. But one thing I can say is that I've been studying this her name is Anandamayi Ma, who you must be very well aware of, the great Indian lady sage teacher. And she teaches this very skillfully. And I think one of her meditations is like just to be continuously aware of your relationship to Brahman, and which I find a remarkable teaching. And I also note that she tends to use the word Bhagavan, which is, I don't know, but it's a particularly lovely word actually. It's used in reference to the Buddha, but it's just that was her word. I just found her. She's an incredibly attractive figure, and I found her teaching incredibly direct and meaningful. Actually, bypassing all philosophy. She really wasn't a scholar, but she was just an incredible practitioner. So.
Yes, very definitely true. You'll get the consent of all the contemporary saints and sages about that, and about her authenticity. So it's good to have people who are without a doubt authentic in spiritual life, because like any other area of life, there are people, there are pretenders, and the seers warn about people who, like charlatans and false prophets and everything from all ages, that when you come across these great souls that are just obviously and undoubtedly the ones to listen to, then you sort of found your way on the path, and then you can engage in, like you say, without contention or argument or doubt or fear at all of those things will just dissolve. And
in the end, it's a matter of silence. So, I mean, to any speech, of course, is a kind of contradiction, but in many ways, I think, as you've said, it is a kind of stimulating thing. Babaji, I have one thing. This week I've been looking at these near-death experiences and the variety of them, and it's kind of interesting to note that like they're mainly the best of them, and the most frequent of them seem to occur amongst the Christian tradition, interestingly enough. It's not solely that, but they tend to predominate. But one of the central features of these experiences is this, is the light, is the kind of appearance of the light, which interestingly, atheists don't call it God. Atheists have the same experience, actually. But many theists refer to that light as God because it's so loving and so on. And it's quite appealing to think of that light as actually being God. But if you reflect on it, it just seems so unlikely that, I mean, in some ways that may be true. But that, if you're saying that that's Brahman, something that you can see or perceive like that, it seems, it's not an argument I particularly want to get into, but for me, Brahman is beyond that light. I mean, Brahman to me is probably, and maybe in some ways it is representative of it. It's hard to know, but in some ways, Brahman is even beyond that. And, to say that that's God, in some ways, yes, it's in some ways you could say, yes, that's because it feels so incredibly full of love and light, and it's clearly the center of things. And yet, that's just surely that light is also just an expression of Brahman, which is, beyond that. I don't know if you've thought about that.
Yes, of course. And thinking falls short too, of course. But basically, today is, for instance, Swami Ramakrishnananda's birthday. So he was one of the 16 great disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, and he particularly loved the master and loved God with form. And he was often talking about light and sound. I mean, he's the one that made that statement that the senses are for the creation, not for the creator. So this outward going senses that gets attached to the sun, for instance, or the moon, or stars at night, or fire around the fireplace. There's this particularly mystical element about light that will always draw us to a higher way of thinking. I think light, and then you have sound. So you've got Jyoti, or light, or also called Bhati. Astabhati Priya was one of the great names for God, Brahman. So Satchidananda is another great name for Brahman, you see. So there are ways of naming it which are rather comprehensive and don't end up in any kind of dissension or argumentation or anything. And they please the soul, and they please the ears. Sound pleases the ears. But then, of course, there are sounds and sights, because you're talking about the realm of light and sound vibration, that are also perfectly capable of demeaning the soul and lowering consciousness. And here on Earth, of course, we run into a lot of those manufactures of the senses, get attracted to them and become heavy and so forth. But so that one thing can take the mind up into the highest flights of meditation, and that very same thing, for instance, light, can take it just to outer stimulation, and like the light of a television or something, you see. So with the mind held in that position of witness consciousness, then it can lift itself off, like Swami Ramakrishnananda was saying. The senses are really outward going, the Mundaka Upanishad says. So there's their nature. And so then Krishna comes along in the Gita and says, take those outward going senses and draw them back in, like a turtle draws its limbs back into its shell when it's in danger.
Yeah.
And the purpose of that is to store up power that otherwise leaks out of the senses when they go out and consider external things. So if a person, people, or race is completely outward going in its pursuits, then all of this spiritual energy leaks away, and they don't have anything at the end of the day or at the end of their life. You're talking about near-death experiences and everything. They don't have anything really to concentrate and and to store up, like say a bee stores up honey in a hive. So that the senses have to be called back from their outward stimulations. And of course, light and sound are one of the ways that that can be done most effectively. Who else has something to add to this? Yes, Chaitanya.
Namaste, Babaji.
Namaste.
Namaste, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, thank you for that wonderful line of questioning and those answers, Babaji, and thank you, Will. Actually spurred up something in my mind that I wasn't sure if I was going to bring up the satsang, but I think I will because it's directly in the line of senses and light. Getting more into the subtle senses, as I was contemplating or doing the dissolution of the mind stream practice, I was kind of getting back into dissolving the senses, the subtle senses that you'd experience within a dream. And my mind began to think about what it is, especially when I got to light or luminosity in the subtle realm, or the dream sense of light. What is it, that is illuminating our dreams or our ability to see in our dreams? Because we have the sun here in this gross plane. And then my mind was like, well, what's illuminating that dream sense of being able to see illumination or visibility? I mean, you could say it's the subtle sun, but I began to think more, it's, just consciousness itself that's illuminating our dreams. And it began to make me think too about, then take that back out to the gross realm again. It's consciousness that's illuminating this as well. I mean, it's the sun as well, but anyway, yeah,
It's beautiful.
That's all
It's
I
very
had.
beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can see several of us smiling. So you're bringing the sun out of our faces, in the form of smiles. Because I remember having thoughts like that too in my early practice, when I was in my 20s and so forth, about considering dreams and what is it that's lighting up my dreams. I remember having those thoughts too, because out here there's an outer sun, so it's pretty easy for everyone to understand that, or at least appreciate it, and then also take it for granted, no doubt. And but inside, when you see things inside, what is the light that's lighting up the dream objects and the dream landscapes? And then it sort of gives you this feeling of this light of consciousness pressing in on everything, and allowing the subtle senses in dream state to appreciate a sunny dream day, or a deep nocturnal stargazing night, because those also happen in your dreams, and rivers flowing and snow-capped mountains, and you may be skiing, or you may be flying, hang gliding or something, but there's a light inside of the dream that's illuminating all of that. So yes, you definitely are getting on the trail of all pervasive consciousness, and how it permeates all three states: waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. And we're speaking of that in that order because we're usually coming from an embodied condition. We're going into dreams, and then we're going into deep sleep, and we're coming back out, and we end up in waking. So our final conclusion about all of this is our waking state, unfortunately, for most people. And so much so that people become concentrated on just the waking state as being real. So if you meditate, then you turn that process back in on itself. Sancharaha prati sancharaha, Father of Samkhya says that everything that's come out has to be taken back in. And so if you're one of the fortunate people who know about the tattvas and who know about the import of tracing origins back to their source, and you're not stuck going outward doing it, like say to a physical sun, but you're instead of turning your consciousness back in, and you're witnessing your dream state, and then you're witnessing your visionary state, because between dream and deep sleep, there's usually this visionary state in which you're having some kind of darshan with a deity or with an ancestor or with a guru, with an ishtam. All of these things are a visionary state where form is heading, like an iceberg is heading towards melting in the ocean because of the direct sunlight of non-dual wisdom, as Sri Ramakrishna used to explain it. All the way along, if you're doing the involution process from waking to dreaming to deep sleep to turiya, the fourth state of pure light, then if you're aware of this presence of light illuminating everything, and this connects back to what Will was saying too, is that light is a very good representation of Brahman. But there are several schools that call that the Brahman effulgence, and they would rather, it's something to go beyond, and as well. It's something that leads you to effulgent darkness. That's been described by Lord Vashishta in Vashishta's Yoga. Beyond the light, which he said was too bright for me, I found this effulgent darkness. So it kind of makes us think about Mother Kali or Lord Shiva, this blackness that's radiant and living and full of intelligence, that's warm and inviting and very much at the core of everything. So yes, all of those things are represented nicely by light, by jyoti, and then we're to follow that trail of light to its source, and find out that the ultimate tattva is like God's mind, is called the Mahat. I was talking about that to someone in prison just 2 days ago about the Mahat. They wanted to know about what the Mahat is in Hindu cosmology. So if you follow that source of light back to the Mahat, or the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, then you have that ultimate origin of where light is coming from. And then beyond that, there's this formlessness, which is sometimes described as radiant, effulgent darkness or blackness. And that can be mistaken for a void, but it's really the source of all things. Everything's soluble back into Brahman, as Ramakrishna used to say.
Thank you, Babaji. My mind, if I may, my mind then when you said it's going back into the Mahat, it was thinking about the word and Om, as you've described it, coming out of Brahma or the Mahat, and going back into him, and just, my mind trying to make these connections then with the word, with Om, and with light. I don't know if there's much more you want to add on that, but your train of thought there at the end caused me to think about the word as well.
Yes, you're right. Those are connecting points. They're very important. So you shouldn't have to feel at all reticent about using words or thoughts. You just need to connect them back to a deeper source. It's otherwise sometimes you can burn bridges and get stuck in philosophy or get stuck in verbiage. But if you use that very philosophy or that very verbiage, which has a tendency, just like light and sound, when it comes out, to attract the senses to lower things, if you turn it inward, you can use that same thing, depending on the tendency of your own mind, the purity of your own mind and senses, to detach from those things and then do this involution process and take everything back to its source. You know that chant that I taught you. Do you remember what I'm thinking about? Can you say it?
Om Vacha Nyachmani Tam Nyacha Buddha Diyam Yacha Cha Buddhi Sakshini Tam Chapi Purnatmani Nirvikalpe Vilapsha Shantam Paramam Bhajasva.
Beautiful. Vilaksha Shantim Paramam Bhajasva. That Brahman is Vilapya Shantim is like the eternal peace, and Paramam Bhajasva is this ecstatic bliss. So how do they get this eternal peace and this ecstatic bliss? By dividing by dissolving everything back to its source. Take everything which is external, divide it back in, dissolve it back into its next component. Gross senses to the subtle senses into the mind into the great mind into Atman, Atman into Brahman. So yeah, those kinds of chants are very valuable as words to make connections for the mind, so that it can get beyond itself. See, mind-ego complex can get beyond itself, and so can the intelligence. The intellect can get beyond itself. That's where this eternal peace and this ecstatic bliss comes from, when you can temper the mind's thoughts and when you can dissolve the intellect's thinking process back into a higher origin. And so, call it Mahat, call it Purusha, call it Atman, call it God, call it Brahman. We got lots of words for it, but we actually have to do the practice of connecting and dissolving.
Thank you, Babaji.
Someone else can participate in Satsang this morning?
Namaste, Babaji. Thank you so much for your time and teachings.
Great.
What keeps connecting for me is I started, I guess, my study with yoga and went to Tai Chi, Qigong, traditional Chinese medicine, and Ayurveda. And it keeps coming back to yin and yang and Wuji. Wuji being a place of stillness, and as soon as there's any movement, you get the opposite, equal and opposite effect. So when I think of God as light, I know there's also a darkness aspect. And the place of the deepest peace is that state of Wuji before there's any movement or division. The non-dual state, I guess, is how that connects.
Mm-hmm.
Still challenged with mantra. I'm one of those busy minds. I can come to quiet places, but I have 3 different short mantras, and I'll find myself flitting from one to the other before I can come to a quiet place. I don't know if you have any recommendations for that. Thank you.
Yeah, like God said to Moses, take 2 stone tablets and call me in the morning. In other words, what I'm saying is, can you write to me and talk to me? We can speak in various ways, and I can tell you how to use those mantras maybe in a more effective way. One mantra is one path, one guru is definitely best, particularly at the beginning. Pretty soon, when you dig one deep well, then whether you do it in Taoism or whether you do it in Christianity or Vedanta, as long as you keep an open mind towards all other religious paths, and also keep it free from violence, like military and so forth. Religion that gets involved with war, with violence, is not religion. So we have to keep it pure and sacrosanct, and that's our opportunity to do that, is with these free philosophies that have come to us from the East mostly. And so there's Middle East and there's Far East, and you can see the difference even in the philosophies that attended upon those nations at those periods of time. But if you ground yourself in one of the authentic ones, and you take a teacher for that, and that teacher gives you a sacred syllable, a sacred formula like mantra, then of course that's been, as Holy Mother said, another great Anandamayi Ma figure, Holy Mother, said, that people have been getting their salvation by the millions using that kind of method. So method is very important. And when you marry a religion with philosophy, then you'll marry the scriptures with mantra, basically. As your love of God with form comes together with your love of the formless Brahman. And what chance does the ego-mind complex have of remaining ignorance amidst that light? You see, so you might say, light is like the middle of a sandwich. You see, there's darkness underlying it, which is ignorance, and then there's this radiant effulgence darkness on top of it, which is Kali. You see, Kali means black. And it's also the goddess Kali we're talking about here in this age that Sri Ramakrishna has awakened for us from the cremation grounds of Mother India. So you'll have this experience of leaving the darkness behind and getting into this effulgent light. And then when that's pondered and you begin to dissolve into it, like we're talking about this dissolution process of all the tattvas, senses, outward going senses, particularly dream senses, mind, even right up to the great mind, and everything that's in between it. When you put all of that into order, or you might say by saying the mantra, you are putting all that into order. You're saying, teach me the ancient divine wisdom, the Adi Daiva Vidya, and show me how that all connects inside to myself, because you don't want to leave the self, the great self, out of the picture. The small self has to have somewhere to dissolve into as well. So the unripe ego has to go to its big brother or its father or its mother and dissolve itself and become a ripe ego. The ripe ego, Sri Ramakrishna says, leads you into Brahman. It won't act as a barrier like the unripe ego does. So this is how you would put together the recitation of the mantra with a concentrated mind. And yes, there are mantras for different things. And there are also mahavakyas, great sayings for ultimate reality as well. And there are lower grade mantras too. I mean, words can be very powerful. Like say in school, you've got a kind of aparavidya mantras going around all the time when you're learning any language, whether it be biology or a foreign language. You just have to know that there are some certain formulas and words that have been uttered by the illumined souls for thousands of years and maybe thousands of ages, and these keep coming back on us, and they keep suggesting themselves to us, even in our dreams. Those are illuminating the four quarters as well. In fact, Vivekananda used to go so far as to say, billions of suns in the sky, they're all great thoughts someone had. Some great soul had a great thought, and here in the Burloka, and when they departed, a sun was created and shone its light upon a particular portion of the manifest universe. So as you go inside, of course, this makes more and more sense to you. And with these connecting words that are so important, these connect right back to the Vak Devi herself. Vak means word, Devi means Saraswati, goddess. So we connect this all back to the mother of the word herself. So be very important in your mantras to have a connection to a deity. You see, deities are very important. You don't want to burn bridges again. We want to keep words. We want to keep philosophy. We want to keep deities. All of these are very important to a great cross section of most people who are living today in the body, whether it be physical bodies, angelic bodies in the next loka, elemental bodies, all the way up until bodies are not necessary for or desirable for the soul to occupy anymore. There's also a bodiless state, videha it's called, where you get full liberation from all forms. So all of this is a beautiful legacy of love that's been left behind by the great seers of India for us, and will always remind us of the connection between words and deities and pathways. The more pathways or nadis or channels we can keep open inwardly, the better for us. The more they disappear, the more we risk becoming just materialists, sensualists, hedonists, and the more we risk that kind of violence that we see in the world everywhere right now, and so much contention, so much disagreement. So sew it all together in your own life with that mantra, deity, guru, philosophy, religion, true religion kind of a weave that you can protect yourself from what my teacher used to say, this old witch, the world. Take yourself from this old witch, the world. Of course, he would say it, this old witch, the world. We have to try and find out what waddled meant. That was a word we had to look into. W-A-H-D-U-L-D. It's actually a Hindu way of saying world, we found out. This old witch, the waddled. And we'd say, what was that again? So very beautiful. Thank you for joining in with us. With your beautiful voice, which is just on the edge of divine emotion every second. Just have full faith in yourselves. Have the courage of your convictions, and make it around spirituality and authentic religion and non-dual philosophy. We know there are a lot of caricatures in the realm of love and the realm of thinking. But there's also the real thing. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater there.
Namaste, Babaji. I wanted to ask about, I've been reading a lot about Swami Abhedananda and his life. And I was just wondering, as a sannyasins are more reclusive people. They don't usually show themselves to the world. I mean, the Swami Abhedananda was different because he had a mission for the world. But usually they know sannyasins to be more reclusive, more monist people, monist followers of religion, and I had to think about it, that how a monist sannyasin can actually take pilgrimages and go and visit temples and worship deities in a way where usually I mean, they're this small portion of people who don't really do this type of worship. They stay in Indran, and they don't really go to places. They don't do formal worship because they have a state of realization or something. How they could be so have so much devotion and so much have that type of aspect of spiritual life so much inlet with them. I know I've heard the answer before, but it always it's still like a question for me, how that comes about in these people.
Definitely, there's inner prompting. You talk about Indran consciousness. It reminds me of Indrani. Probably one of the best goddesses is Indrani. That's Indra in a female form. So she's got a name that's named after the god of the senses and god of the gods, Indra. But her name's Indrani, so she must be very Indran, right? So you should probably follow her inward, if that's her name, and she's the goddess of that in both languages. As far as sannyasins are concerned, probably the first time we saw one come forth in such a prominent fashion was when Vivekananda appeared at the Parliament of Religions in 1893. Talk about a mission. That was more like a divine intervention in the midst of a Kali Yuga, in the midst of a nation which had the potential for greater freedom, but which has also had this great predilection towards invention, warlike invention. So when Vivekananda spoke at the Parliament of Religions in 1893, you had and he stood up and said, I belong to the oldest order of sannyas called sannyasins. And it's the first time most people heard that word, sannyasin. And it's really different than monk or monastic. It's a monastic person or being, but nonetheless, they're free of, as we saw in the Ramakrishna order, and today being Ramakrishnananda's birthday, is a good time to speak about it, how when the master passed away from the body into samadhi, that they all went wandering. So they didn't have a monastery upon which to gather. And later on, the Ramakrishna order sprang up, and that was because of this great mission that was to reach thousands and thousands, now millions of people. And thousands and thousands of sannyasins came out of that too. And this was all at the mother's bidding. The mother's own prayer brought this about. Divine Mother, we're talking about Holy Mother here. Sri Sharada Devi, the manifestation of Kali. So when she prayed that her wandering children had to have a home, then it started to happen. And about that time and earlier, Rani Rashmani had been sailing up the Hooghly River and saw this land and had a divine vision that there should be a temple on that land. So she went and spent lakhs of rupees to get that piece of land and did a puja on it early on. And before too long, that was the Kali temple that was growing out of that soil. So this is all, looking back before 1893, back to the early roots of the Ramakrishna order, where these whole host of sannyasins would make it their mission to come out of hiding, if you want to put it that way, and expose to the world not only their own realization as exemplars, but also this ancient Vedanta philosophy, and particularly its Advaitic element, and also resurrect dualism and ritualism. Like Ramakrishnananda was one of those sannyasins whom, when all of the other children of the master were thinking Brahman, samadhi, enlightenment, freedom, but both Ramakrishnananda and Vivekananda were thinking, help the world, help the world, help the world. And Abhedananda was also thinking that. So Vivekananda said, you must come west and help these people. Meanwhile, Ramakrishnananda went down to the south of India and spread Sri Ramakrishna's names down there. And when the master had just passed, he was always also the one that gathered the master's artifacts up. What he wore, his slippers, his shawl, everything that Sri Ramakrishna, the few things that he had that he owned in his life and the things that he associated with were all, sought out and saved by Swami Ramakrishnananda. So later on, we're showing up there at the temples and being worshipped. And so the whole thing was meant to reach people of all different levels of understanding, philosophical, religious, non-dual, ritualistic, and the whole gamut in between. So that's the beautiful thing about the modern day sannyasin. And actually, I remember that Vivekananda was writing a letter to some people back in India. And he said, I know only too well about the problem of modern day sannyas, he said. So there were people that were already taking sannyas, as we've seen in the West here, put some picture of a guru around your neck and then do anything you want because I'm free, kind of sannyas. So he saw that was already beginning to happen when he was alive. And of course, he was an exemplar of giving up everything in order to be free, not trying to take everything with you and then calling yourself free when basically you're surrounding yourself with possessions and pleasures and desires. And so the real sannyasin, followed that ancient path of sannyas that was definitely of a very highly renunciate flavor, and had that important element of tapas in it, that you did austerities to get your realization. You didn't just all of a sudden declare yourself to be free and cut capers, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say. So that's very important to look at the true manifestation of sannyas. And we have it in the Shankara order, and we have it now in the Ramakrishna order. So there are good examples of it that we can look at. And that will keep us on a straight track as far as who's the best teacher to follow. See, they're asking that question sometimes on the web and so forth. And so you've got these gurus that are moneyed and huge, lots of money personally, not just an organization that has money. There's nothing wrong with that if you use it to help the masses, like the Ramakrishna order does. But individuals that are calling themselves world teachers who have lots of money. And so then you look at Swami Vivekananda, who didn't have a penny to his name his whole life. And neither did my teacher have a penny to his name his whole life, Swami Sheshananda. So they're very serious about this vow of renunciation, not owning anything, and being free of all things, actually free of them, not just even not even keeping them near, because their teacher taught them, wealth is like keeping a treasure in a room next to a mirror. It reflects in a mirror all the time. So the mind is that mirror, and if you're thinking about wealth all the time, then it's reflecting there. So you want to take the whole mirror and the treasure both and put them somewhere, cause the mind to reflect only upon Brahman and absolute truth. And then you could call yourself a true sannyasin. So it's not a word to be handed out or taken lightly. It really has to be earned, and it does belong to an ancient order that goes back to the very roots of India's full identification with the Brahman that is free of all articles, all objects, and so forth. And to requote Swami Ramakrishnananda again here at the end, he said, the senses are for the creation, not for the creator. So you're going to have to give up the senses and dissolve them back into the internal senses, and then dissolve that back into the mind into the great mind into the Atman into Brahman. You can do this in 10 seconds because I just said it in 5. But you might want to take an hour to do it the first time. We'll call it the dissolution of the mind stream meditation. And take all the things and in the connections you know about them and mentally dissolve it all back. You can do a mental puja too. If you don't have all the articles, I don't have flowers, I don't have candles, I don't have polished copper plates, I don't have vessels, then you just create them in your mind. And as long as you know the puja, then you do the mental puja in your mind from beginning to end. The problem with that is that your mind, you'll bow down to the altar and you'll offer the flower, and all of a sudden you find your mind wandering off somewhere. So you didn't finish your puja, right? So go back and make your mind finish that puja. Start with the flower, offer the flower, say the mantra, and then go ahead and offer the incense, light the candle in your mind, and do the whole thing. I've done this before myself. Before we actually did the 3-hour Durga Puja in the first SRV ashram that we did that in, I did the whole puja in my mind on the plane on the way to the mainland from Hawaii twice. So I would just there in the plane at 40,000, whatever, 35,000 feet, and just did the whole puja in my mind. And then when I got to Portland, I did it at the shrine. So that's called a mental puja, manasa puja it's called. And you'll find the great non-dualist Shankara doing that in one of his scriptures. And there's a hymn about it. I actually sung that hymn on one of the Jaima music CDs. So you can actually take a guided music puja with me if you want. You get that puja, put it on, and just do the offerings as I sing them. So this is all indicative of maturing your inner life, your internal life, see, so that you're taking your worship away from the outer gods, you see, and you're beginning to place it more of the emphasis on the inner deities. And then the inner deities are in you, and then pretty soon you find the real you, the true self. And so this is all in due deference and reverence to Swami Ramakrishnananda, who we are talking about right now, is that he said the senses are for the creation. So go ahead, they can see the creation, but they're not for the creator. When you go back to the creator, or this, what's even beyond the creator, then you're going to have to give the senses away by degrees into the subtle senses. That's your dream senses we just talked about. And then those dream senses into deep sleep, which is that first formlessness that you'll come upon. You might say it's the form of formlessness itself. And then beyond that is Brahman, or beyond deep sleep is Turiya, as the advices like to put it. And so you're there for the whole journey, right? It's a spiritual journey you take, and you can take it at any time you want. You can become that flexible with it. All right, time to shut out the world. So it's not just, oh, I have to meditate once a day. It's like, I'm going to do this communion with God once a day, maybe once an hour, maybe twice a day. And you sit longer doing it, but your mind has something to focus on rather than just some thought that I'm meditating, see, that never got you anywhere in 10 years. So you focus it, see, and take it inward with you as the actual living participant. Pretty soon they say, the self is the object of its own adoration. You'll find that what you're really worshiping is that one self in all beings. But all the articles that you use on the way in, you're deifying them. That's the tantric way. You see, you're deifying them, and as you deify them, then they get renounced naturally. They're not an object anymore that you can hold on to. They're subtle, and then they're causal, and then they're causeless. So anyway, from the gross to the subtle, to the subtlemost, to the causal, to the causeless, may we always and ever be like mighty rivers flowing onto the sea, losing all sense of name, form, and identity into the ocean of absolute reality. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat.